Hey there. This episode originally aired on my Patreon many months ago, so some of the information might be a little bit outdated by now. If you'd like to check out episodes as soon as they come out, you can join my $3 tier over there, or you can subscribe to check out full episodes coming here eventually. Either way, the choice is yours. Enjoy the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pat's Creative Podcast, episode 9. You see, I actually remembered the episode number this time because I'm on top of things. And you know who else is always on top of things? My friend here, Forrest Lee. Forrest Lee, would you care to introduce yourself to the beautiful people out there?
Hi. Yeah. My name's Forrest Lee. I just go by Lee. We were talking about this before we started recording. I've been around YouTube for about 7-8 years now, which is crazy. It's been a wild
Absolutely
ride.
Crazy.
I've done a ton of stuff with a bunch of channels. I used to do work with the Normal Boots and Did You Know Gaming. I also used to make a series for the Game Theorists. Now I edit for them. And I have my own new channel called Full Motion Videos.
Very nice. Yeah, and I definitely recommend you guys check out his newest channel. I actually just watched your Pokemon Go video that you released or whatnot. And it was, I understand that one was kind of from before, but it's just nice being reminded of such like a phenomenon, you know? It's like a different time in history.
It is kind of a gateway into the before.
Yeah, exactly. So it's definitely like it marks a point in history, and it's nice to like be reminded of that, you know. But yeah, so I usually after the guest interviews introduces themselves, I like to kind of explain my history with them. I've seen you around for several years now because just through the different connections you have, and you said you were also like running a series with Game Theory. I think I actually ran into you at SGC 2015.
Oh my gosh.
Very briefly. Yes, it was a long time ago.
Wow. I haven't heard SGC in many
I know,
moons.
and that was the last year they did it. Which is a shame because I had an absolute blast that year. But I met a lot of cool people, but I don't think I fully understood who you are, which is at the time, which is a shame because like looking back then, I'm like, oh, I would have had such more things to say, you know.
I think at SGC, that was if it was 2015, that was before I started working with Matt, because we started working together in like August of that year, something around that.
Right. Okay.
So I was still I still am a normie, but at the time I was just attending the convention, right?
Right. And I think that's actually a good segue into one of the first questions I want to ask you is just with being so involved with this like industry or whatnot and having your hands in so many buckets, like how did you get involved in all this? You know, what's your like process of networking to get into all these cool projects and start producing your own and whatnot?
Yeah. So, okay. Back in the day, a lot of these websites no longer exist. Like, there was a group called Hidden Block, which a bunch of other gaming YouTubers, and they had like a forum where people could share their stuff. That was a little before my time, but that one Video Gamer did the same thing where they had a website where they spotlighted creators.
Right.
And I submitted, I think, my first video to them, and they highlighted it, and that's how I met Gerard through that. Like, and also around that time, the Game Theorists started a show about the like history of Smash Brothers, like move sets and stages and stuff, and I had a very similar show. And I had a friend who just tweeted at MattPat like, "Hey, my friend also had a series like this. You should check it out." And Matt just happened to see that tweet and happened to click on it and happened to watch my stuff, and he was like, "Oh, this is good." And he was looking for editors at the time because I think he had Ronnie and Foot of a Ferret as the only editors at the time.
Right.
And he reached out, and that's how I met Matt, just through pure happenstance on Twitter. And Matt being Matt opened a lot of like gateways and doorways.
Right. Okay. So that was like the entry to like video production for you, would you say? Like professionally at least?
Yeah, that professionally, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Like it honestly, getting into YouTube and all that stuff, it's pure luck. Like being good is nice. Right, but
being good is nice. Yeah,
being good is nice, but there are a ton of editors and creatives who are better at video production than I am, who just, for whatever reason, unfortunately didn't have the same luck.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, there will always, be people who are just much better at what you do. It's just kind of the process of it. But like, it's worth mentioning that if you had just the luck and not the skill, I'm sure this wouldn't have happened. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like definitely being good at stuff pays off in some sense.
What's that famous quote? Like, opportunity is luck mixed with whatever. Yeah. It's
determination
something like that.
Or something. Yeah, definitely. Because, if you just happen to get lucky and someone's like, yeah, you edit this video, and then you just do a poor job, obviously it wouldn't.
And they're like, thank you for your service. Move on.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll pay you for the day, and we'll just move on. So yeah. And how long exactly did you like edit for Game Theory? Was it or not edit, but produce content? Were you editing and producing content?
Yeah. So I was doing both. The way the setup was, like, I was primarily an editor, and I did, for a while there, I was actually primarily a writer as well. Like, I transitioned away from editing for a little bit. That was 2015 to 2018 when I started at Normal Boots. Yeah, so about that 3-year span, 2.5, 3-year span.
Right.
Most of it was editing and writing, and Matt, being an amazingly generous, very kind human being, also gave a lot of the editors like chances to pitch the show. Because at the time, you look at the channel now and it's very different because of how YouTube operates. But at the time, like, Matt wanted the Game Theorists. That's why it's called the Game Theorists and not Game Theory.
Right.
He wanted the Game Theorists to be a platform for other creators to do stuff. So he would let other people pitch shows, which is why at the time you had Gaijin Goomba have his cultural series on there.
Right, yeah.
The late, great Ronnie Edwards had Digressing and Side Questing, which was like a game design analysis.
Of course. I remember that Super Metroid video very well.
Yeah,
I always think about it every time I play the game now.
I think about his Doom one, about how Doom is not a 3D game.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Oh, yeah, you're right. No, I literally can't play those games now without thinking of those videos. It's crazy.
Which is insane to think about the impact videos like that can have.
Definitely.
And writer Foot of a Ferret, who also is still very active. You should check him out.
Sure.
He had a Brief History, and I had the Breakdown. And Brief History and Breakdown were like polar opposite.
Tonality-wise?
Yeah, tonality retrospectives.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because his was like,
that's interesting.
Let's cover a whole series in less than 10 minutes. Let's go. And mine was like,
let's take like a small thing and just expand it.
Let's talk about this one game for like 15 minutes. Why don't we?
Right.
Yeah.
So now you said you worked a little bit with editing and writing or whatnot. Do you have like, because you've worked with a lot of different art forms. I mean, I think you were even experimenting with like poetry for a while, right?
Yeah. Oh, geez, that's a deep cut. You did do research.
Oh, I mean, I didn't have to do research. I've been a follower for so long.
Yeah.
Is that something you're still practicing, or is that like
a little bit? It was never like a primary thing. That often came from I was in a very turbulent emotional point in my life, so I decided, I should
find an elegant way to articulate it.
Yeah, articulate a lot of like depression and anxiety and all that stuff into a poetry form.
Sure.
And I still do that occasionally. A lot of it is like it's more so in like I want to get into like fiction writing, so a lot of that has kind of been not diluted but transferred into fiction writing versus poetry. Right.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is that like writing poetry seems like an excellent exercise in just writing in general, because you're challenged so much to condense things and whatnot. So I imagine just it's a fun exercise that makes you a better writer in general. And the reason I brought it up was because do you find that you kind of prefer the writing side of things over more the post-production? Like where do you think more your preferences more lie?
That's a good question. I think post-production is easier.
Interesting. That's interesting. I don't think everyone would agree. I think some people find post-production very intimidating, but please continue.
Yeah. I find post-production, like, I kind of treat that like a job more than anything, because I still do edit freelance. That's my main source of income.
Right.
So I treat that like a job. So it's almost easier. Whereas the writing is like, I want it to be impeccable. I want it to be perfect.
Right. So do you think you have more like perfectionism when it comes to writing as opposed to like...
Absolutely.
Which
absolutely
is funny to hear because your editing is like impeccable. Like your motion graphics and everything. Because I'm a graphic designer and kind of video editing by, well, I guess technically my job is video editing right now too. So I do all these things and then I see your stuff and it's like everything I do, but so much better to such a better extent. And I'm just like, okay, this is someone who's like mastered that craft. And I think it's interesting that to you, it's like, okay, post-production, that's the easy part just to get my words out there, basically.
Yeah. Like, oh man, this is dirty little secrets coming out. A lot of the like motion graphics, like title work design that I do, I didn't do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's gotcha. The title packs are like things, they're motion graphic. There's a panel inside Premiere. I edit in Premiere, which you shouldn't do. You should learn After Effects. But
no kidding. I would have never guessed you don't use After Effects. This is dirty little secrets right now.
I try to, with every video and every project, use After Effects for at least one thing and something new, so I can like learn the program more.
That's a great way to go about it. Yeah.
I don't actually know After Effects that well.
Sure.
In Premiere, and I'm sure that it's a thing in After Effects as well, there's a panel called Essential Graphics, which it's just pre-made stuff that you can buy or download online and like put into your program.
Right.
And
so, I mean, there's still something to be said, though, the fact that you fooled me and you probably fool a lot of other people, right? Like, that's kind of what editing is it's like, because, I don't know if you've heard the talks about how like nothing is actually original in art, everything
Absolutely,
is a remix off of something. The whole goal is to make people forget that it's a remix, to make them think it's something like new and presentable or whatnot. And you definitely had me thinking like, this guy must spend a ton of time on these like motion and stuff. So I think there's still a beauty to it,
I'm sorry to disappoint.
Oh, it's no disappointment to me. I hate After Effects with a passion. So it's no disappointment here.
Yeah, you like I don't know if they would want me to say who this was, but a friend I had for a while said like I was like blown away by their like post-production ability, and they like make a living doing motion graphics and graphic design and all that. And they said like, especially for YouTube and their personal work, they were like, I don't have the time, but I have the money. I can invest in like a $30, motion graphics pack. I can do that.
Yeah.
And
no, it's smart.
Yeah, like, yeah. It's a weird world.
I have a question then, because like I'm a huge Madness fan, by the way.
Thank you.
Like, it's downright my favorite like roundtable discussion series ever. Like ever. I love it so much. And like you have like so much like motion stuff in there or whatnot. Like what's the process like editing something like that where you're dealing with so many different camera perspectives and you have to add like sound effects? How do you even visualize in your head like the outcome of how it's going to look? Like, does that something that just feels so natural to you at this point, or do you have kind of like a process or of figuring it out?
A lot of it was doing it for so long that it felt natural.
Right.
With Madness, like, we had an amazing crew helping us film that stuff.
Right.
We filmed some in Seattle, but the lion's share of it was filmed at that one video gamer office in LA.
Sure.
And Gerard's crew is just amazing.
Sure.
But when they were setting up, they would always like double check with me, like, is this the perspective you want? So like I already had an idea of how the camera shots would look.
Sure.
And honestly, a lot of that came from like, a lot of that just came from going with the flow of a conversation. I just hit the mic. Sorry about that.
It's fine. It's totally fine.
A lot of it's going with the flow of a conversation and cutting on like that beat it feels right to cut here.
Right.
Right. That person has a good reaction to what they're saying here. I should, put that in.
Embrace that.
Yeah.
Of course. And would you say that like, so for all intents and purposes, you were kind of like the director of that whole project. Like, was that kind of your project in a sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so.
And would you say that was like one of your more ambitious projects?
Yeah, it definitely was. It had a very different vision for what it was versus how it turned out. Like,
sure.
Okay.
Do you have some behind the scenes visions?
Yeah,
Are we about to see another alternate form of madness?
Well, we had like the original idea came from, that was a thing my friends and I did in high school. Like, we would have like a giant list of like, what are the best cartoons? We should like do a tournament about this and a discussion thing. And I was talking to Shane Gill, who one of the Normal Boots guys, he runs Did You Know Gaming, about this years later. And we were like, oh, we should do this as a show. That'd be fun. And we were really inspired by this, I think it's a Rooster Teeth show called $1 Million Butt, where they have three people on a panel. It's not really a panel, so to speak. Right. Where all three of them come up with you get $1 million, but you have to live with this.
Right. Like, okay. Gotcha.
But the way they did the production of that show, like the camera angles, I was like, that's like what I'd want to do with Madness.
Interesting. So you were inspired by the formal qualities of that show, and you're like, how can we implement that here? That's very interesting.
And just as a general note, like I want to put out there into the ether, like we should have been. Let me rephrase that. I should have been more communicative with the Normal Boots audience as to, like, if you go and look at Madness, the format's weird. Like, the tournament bracket format is weird. It was like, the first round was all 1v1s.
Sure.
Then the second round was
is like
a three-for-all, is what we called it.
Battle Royale.
Yeah. That, we did that because it was not realistic to expect that to be 2 rounds, right? Like,
sure.
It wouldn't be realistic to film. It would have added another day to the filming schedule.
It probably would have been hard to discuss too, to have like that much more time to discuss about these games. Like, how many times can you make new points, you know?
By that final round, we always got like, we were running pretty thin on stuff to talk about.
Sure.
But like, and when we had guests, the guests who were so gracious to give us basically 3 days of their time, those shoots were all day, like at a minimum 6 hours, because every episode's like 30 minutes. Every episode that we released was like 20-25 minutes, and that's because I cut out like 5 minutes of dead air,
and that doesn't even include all the time in between like recording. So it's never just start and stop. There's always something in between.
So easily that would be, 6-7 hours all day shooting. It's exhausting.
Definitely.
We felt like we, in good conscience, could not ask people to give another day of their time when they're already being so gracious.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I should have been more communicative with the Normal Boots audience about like that weird format. And when people commented and suggested, why don't you do the regular formatted? But hey,
it's hard. To be fair, honestly, like that's part of the reason I love the show though, was because it's so much its own thing. It's to the point where I've actually like, well, I don't want to say it in this podcast because it's not confirmed yet. But basically like it's inspiring to me to see something that's so like your original vision, that it's like, even if it's not the vision that you originally wanted to have, right? And I think that's something that's kind of important though with like leading your own projects, is that you have to be okay with your projects evolving into something that you didn't originally see it to be, right? I feel like sometimes it's easy to get a vision in your head and stick to it so much to the point that when you start collaborating with other people and bringing other people in, just things might seem blatantly better to do at some point, and you're like, I can't change it because this is my vision or whatnot. Sometimes like the project can just fall apart that way. And one thing I've always advocated is just, it's okay if your project's just not the same from when it started, because if it evolves, it's evolving for a reason, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the the realities of a shoot always change how your thing's going to turn out. I think that's true from the smallest YouTube show up to major motion pictures. Like, realities on set will change your vision of the project, and you just have to go with that, and that's okay.
You do. Yeah. Yeah, and like, because you let it evolve or whatnot, I think you got a show that's unlike any other like on YouTube that I've seen. So, and at the end of the day, you know, the discussions were great no matter how you format it. So
absolutely.
It's like, that's what was great. I had mad respect for Caddy. He was one of my favorite guests. But yeah, anyway,
he flew in from another continent to be on that show. Another example of like, it's very gracious with their time. Yeah.
But that's because the show is so well crafted, you know. It's such a fun thing to discuss. It makes you want to do it with your friends. It makes you want to put things on a tournament, you know. So anyway, I don't mean to stick on the show forever. I'm just like a big fan. Good. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So yeah, we talked a little bit about like some of your other projects or whatnot. You've worked with so many different teams on your time in the industry or whatnot. Like, how often do you run into creative differences with other members? You know, like, how much has creative differences affected your projects per se, or projects that you're working on with other people? Is that apparent a lot, or is it kind of not as often?
I feel like I've been very lucky. I was with a group called Arcadia for a while, which has now, it was originally a channel called Eruption. There was a guy named Austin Eruption running it. And we
actually remember Arcadia.
Yeah, we had a couple creative differences, and that was one of the reasons I left that group. He still makes cool stuff. Check him out. But honestly, that's the only real example I can think of. And even that was like not, you know, it wasn't like, we just had different ideas of what we wanted to do. If you look at his content, it's very like comedic focused, and mine was not. And that's how that goes. And it's natural. But honestly, I've been very lucky with like how on the same page I've been. And also when you work freelance, a lot of the time you have to, you know,
listen to what other people say as opposed to
like when I'm editing an episode of Game Theory or Film Theory, it's Matt's show. He has the final say.
And do you think that background makes it easier to work with people in general because you're used to that? Like, do you think you can find the common ground easier because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, I feel so lucky to have worked on such a variety of different stuff. You know, trivia shows and documentaries and weird. I don't even know what film theory and game theory are classified at, like edutainment, I guess.
That's a good way to put it.
But they're all so different, and you get like a handle on a lot of different voices, and I do feel like that was a huge advantage going in.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And like, do you have any advice for other people who are also trying to like get into the freelancing area, you know, with like, because it's kind of a tough field to breach, if I'm not mistaken. Like you said, you kind of got lucky, but also, of course, you worked very hard at it. But is there any like general mindsets you advocate having, or any kind of tips basically that helps make that process smoother when entering that field?
Yeah. You are not going to find success overnight, obviously.
Right.
Like, especially on YouTube and Twitch and all that sort of stuff. It takes time to grow. And like, don't take it personally when things fall apart. Like when a job falls apart, don't take it personally. Because a lot of the time it's just like, oh, I can no longer afford to do this, or like I just want to take it in a different direction.
Has that happened often for you specifically? Like, is that something that's common in that field, is just jobs falling out?
I've only really had one that kind of fell apart. I used to do, I'm sure if you've been on YouTube, you've seen, I think they're called content farms. It's not a very nice way to put it, but like,
I do think I know what you're talking about.
Like stuff like I used to edit for a channel called Looper.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And those were like fine fluff videos about like.
Fine's a good way to put it.
Yeah, they're
fine.
They're fine. Like they know exactly what they are. They're kind of listicles without being top tens.
They have a place, right?
They know that most people watch YouTube on the toilet, and
right.
They just want something on in the background.
Want something with the exact time duration it takes them to finish their business and get up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that fell apart because they were going in a different direction, and I think they moved a bunch of people in house instead of farming it out.
Of course.
Which makes sense.
Sure.
No ill will from that. Like that, it makes sense.
Yeah. Has a project ever like kind of gotten you down because of things going sour? Like even if it didn't fully collapse, has there been any time, like you obviously don't have to get into specifics, but just where you're working on a project and you're just thinking because of some kind of other means in the project, you're thinking like, dang, like this makes it really hard to work right now because of like the way they're handling this project or something like that, right?
Never with like a channel. Never like.
Sure.
Like with Normal Boots and Game Theory and Digino Gaming and even Arcadia, like it has never happened. I can think of one situation. I was doing a brand deal, and I won't say who the brand was.
Sure.
I don't even know if that NDA is still in effect. But it was like such a pain in the butt. Like it was a video game company, and their creative side, the development team, was super into the video, but their legal department was not.
That's unfortunate.
And there was just no way to reconcile what the two sides wanted.
Right.
So that video, in its original form on its original channel, was supposed to go up on, never came out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was that like just a bummer because you spent so much time working on it? Like, is that like, what kind of got you down?
From conception to like it just actually falling through, that took almost a year.
Oh, man.
And I was really proud of that project.
Right.
And yeah, it was a bummer. Yeah, for sure.
It is. Yeah. Well, and I think that segues into another thing I kind of wanted to ask, and that's just about like how invested you feel for projects that you don't like orchestrate, because with doing a lot of freelancing or whatnot, do you feel at different levels of investment, whether it's your own voice that you're portraying, or is it just kind of like a job's a job? Like, I need to be invested either way.
When I first started out, I was really invested in everything I did. Which from the outside looking in is admirable.
Sure.
But from a realistic life perspective, don't do that.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy way to live and work.
Yeah.
To be
definitely
super invested in everything you do, even up to like Normal Boots. I was super invested in Normal Boots.
Right. Well, and to be fair, you did have your own projects in Normal Boots, right?
Yeah,
Did that kind of add to your investment levels?
So the shows we had on Normal Boots were Madness, Did You Know Movies, Worlds Within Worlds, which tragically did not get enough episodes. It was infeasible. And I got the Drunk Show we did.
Right.
Which was born out of necessity of videos more so than anything.
Or necessity out of drinks. Either way, yeah.
Honestly, the Drunk Show came around because we had a lot of difficulty scheduling season 2 of Madness. And we were like, well, we're out of videos. We need stuff.
Right.
Like now, we need stuff now. Let's film a thing. And I had always really liked the drunk history format, which is very obvious in that show.
Sure.
But like pretty much everything except Did You Know Movies, which was and is Shane's show.
Right.
That was also a film theory show before it jumped over to Normal Boots.
So is it almost relaxing then when you're working with other people, because you almost feel like there's some stress off your shoulders because it is their project? Like when you do voice work for Did You Know Gaming or Did You Know Movies or whatnot, is that kind of like a stress release almost because you're like, I just got to read a thing?
Well, with the voice work, I always like, I want it to be as high quality as possible. The voice work specifically, only the voice work. I say only the voice work. With the voice work specifically, I take a lot of pride in that being like high quality.
Okay.
I get what you're trying to say. Just that specific example was like,
right. Okay. So what would that be form? Is that more editing then? Would you say that's like the stress relief? Because
absolutely, the stress from editing comes from the deadlines.
Definitely.
But it's, I don't want to say I'm not invested in it, like, because I want them to be good. People are paying me to, you know, and make their stuff not bad.
Definitely.
So I want it to be good. But it is nice to not have the pressure of like my own expectations upon it, if that makes sense.
Of course. And that's how it differs from working on your like full motion videos projects and stuff like that.
Yeah, and even with full motion videos, that specifically came about as a like I want something that is good quality, consistent quality, but not necessarily I take months and months on a single video, which is something I did used to do.
Right.
Because I want to do one every week, basically. So it's a format developed like to be easy to make.
Yeah. And I think a lot of creators kind of get stuck in the mindset of needing to have something like 100% complete. Like the most recurring thing I pretty much say in this series is, perfect is good, but finished is better.
Yes. And I was just about to bring that up. Like,
yeah, because, and I think we've been kind of tailing around it a little bit because you were talking about how it's not feasible to be entirely invested in every decision you make, when in the reality, like a lot of those small decisions don't really matter so much. Right. And it doesn't change the content of what you're saying. So it's like, especially when it comes to post-production specifically, I think it's important to not get caught in the snag of like, this has to be absolutely perfect, because very rarely do those projects ever finish, right?
Yep. Like,
those mostly get stuck on the back burner.
I really do respect when people do that. Like, people can make some insanely high quality stuff. Satchel Drake's made insanely high quality stuff. I don't know if he's still doing YouTube.
I believe he made a sandwich and then put that on a video. So he's gone in an awesome new direction. I'm all here for the breakfast sandwich series.
I absolutely love him.
Of course.
There's another YouTuber I watch called Ristic Studies. He does a bunch of Magic the Gathering videos, and they're super high quality, and they come out maybe once a month. Like,
right.
High quality is.
You also have people who like take even more than a month though. Like sometimes like there'll be people who take like half a year or whatnot, you know? So, but I just feel like whenever I get caught in that, it doesn't do a lot of great things for my like creative space. You know, I feel like creatively, it's just so draining to be tied to one project and one voice that you made so long ago. And especially with editing specifically, when you have to re-listen to yourself think and process, and they're all thoughts from like several months ago. I find that just to be not like super creatively healthy. I don't know if you've had similar
absolutely like I'm trying to think of like, what is there another creative field that people work so long on something that, and this is going to sound bad, but that honestly gives so little back.
Right.
Like, YouTube is great. It's fantastic. It's an excellent platform. But like we said, people watch it on the toilet. Like, I have YouTube on in the background while I'm cooking. Like,
the audience investment level is not nearly the same as to people who go to see movies in cinemas or people who go to galleries to see paintings and whatnot. Yeah, and like, I'm not saying don't put that sort of work into a creative project you're passionate about. YouTube is a platform. It's not, you know, it's an outlet of creative expression, you know? So you want to put work towards your creative expression.
Just for me, and this is what I would recommend to people, the healthiest creative way to view YouTube is like, to not have that huge investment in a single project. Here's a good example. There's an excellent 3D artist. His name is Beeple, Beeple. His Instagram is Beeple Crap.
seems to be, you know, putting irony in like an artist's name seems to be a common trend, you know.
His whole shtick is he does one 3D render every day, and he's been doing that for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And his stuff is insanely high quality just because he has gotten so good at it. It's also not safe for work for people. Some of it's not safe for work. Like
that is a good thing to mention.
Some of it's not safe for work. Like he had a very politically outspoken and had some not nice things to say about the current president of the United States through image form.
Visual aid.
Yeah. But I heard him talk about that project, and he views the whole thing as the project, not the single, you know, daily
picture.
Yeah. Because the daily stuff he does is like, I can't invest more than an hour or 45 minutes into this because it's a thing I'm doing today, and I have to do it again tomorrow. The whole thing is the project, not the single piece.
That's such a fascinating way to look at it. Like to have multiple releases and think this is all going towards one bigger goal. And that's what I'm putting my work towards. It's not necessarily, I'm not losing sleep over these like daily things. I guess that's one of the positives just about deadlines. I mean, obviously there's a lot of positives about deadlines, but when you kind of put yourself, when you put yourself on a timer and have to get things done, but you're still working towards that overall goal, that feels like a way where you can kind of stay motivated while still feeling like you're working on your magnum opus in a sense, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the way to view YouTube, at least the way I make YouTube videos now, which is the one a week, you know.
And would you say you're enjoying that more than kind of your past projects? Because you did also have a personal channel before this, right?
Yeah.
Where you were kind of working on different things.
Yeah, I had video essays. Videos? Yeah.
Right.
I had. I'm sorry. Yeah. Finish your question for your.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, has it been less stressful working on this new channel? Like, do you feel like your mindset's now helping you a little bit more with like a less stress approach to it?
Yeah. Like, with that personal channel you were mentioning, I made like video essays where I spent a lot of time on the writing and the editing, and I maybe got like 4 videos a year. Like,
yes.
And that ended up being way more stressful than the one a week. I'm just talking about the Easter eggs in this zone in World of Warcraft that I could find. I'm talking about this Witcher short story. I'm talking about, what do I have here?
Yeah, I noticed you're plugging your channel inside the webcam. That's great.
No,
I should do that.
I won't. I won't turn the webcam towards it, but it's much more creatively satisfying to talk about the thing, finish it up, move on,
definitely,
and like now it's out of my brain.
It gives more opportunities to talk about like smaller things. You know, it can be easy to think like I have to make such a big picture video about this this broader image or this broader topic or whatnot. But when you do put yourself on a deadline and make things at a much quicker pace, but kind of smaller projects, you're able to appreciate things like tiny Easter eggs inside World of Warcraft or something, you know, and those things deserve appreciation too, right?
Yeah.
Like it's important to appreciate the little things, and having that kind of format really helps that. So
like, full motion videos came about because I mentioned earlier, I was watching stuff while I was cooking or whatever.
Sure.
And a lot of it was like not low effort. I never want to say something on YouTube is low effort, but like not super high effort stuff talking about here's this cool stories, like obscure Star Wars expanded universe story that no one has talked about. Oh, this is interesting. I want to listen to this. And then I figured I could do that. Like, I love that sort of stuff. I love the Easter eggs. I love weird, obscure stories from major franchises.
I mean, and if you're watching it, like, even if you're thinking like, oh man, they could have tweaked this, they could have added more to this or something. But the fact that you're watching it says something, right? Like it still means like, oh, there's actually value for this or whatnot.
Yeah.
There's value for Looper, you know, might not be have the same audience, you know, it might not be pertaining to you, but like it has value, right?
I hope I'm not coming off as like bashing channels like Looper. Like they have their place.
No,
they know
I
what
don't
they're
think
doing.
You are.
Yeah, like and the people who ran Looper knew exactly what it was. Like
sure. It's the same thing with like Watch Mojo, right? Like it's easy to use Watch Mojo as like a punching bag, but honestly, like people watch it, you know, there's a need for that kind of content, and that's all art is, right? Is filling up voids of people who want something, you know.
It's it's the listicle articles that like BuzzFeed makes, right? Like I don't personally like those, but there's a place for them and people enjoy them, and they're fun. There's no reason for them not to exist, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how we got onto this topic, but
honestly, they go, I write down a bunch of questions in preparation for this. I very rarely even look at the document because I just like to let the conversation go where it goes, you know? But yeah, no, I think we were talking about, you know, like the more minuscule format or whatnot. Basically, it's important to not just get caught up in like the minute details about certain things. And you might find that working on a bunch of different things just opens up your levels of appreciation more than you ever thought, you know?
I just remembered something I was going to say. Like, having all these smaller projects has kind of rekindled my like ideas for bigger projects. I mentioned this on Twitter a while back. I don't ever use Twitter anymore. By the way,
as you shouldn't.
If you're a creative and having trouble with like mental health stuff, just get off Twitter.
Yeah, at the very least, turn notifications off, man.
Yeah,
That's the killer. You know, you get that notification and you're just like, dopamine. Let me check real quick. Yeah, it's very unhealthy.
But I had like, this was born out of conversations I've had with other writer friends where we're like, man, I was really disappointed with how, example, the Star Wars sequels turned out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's a good framework for those movies there, but I would have like tweaked this or like nudged that in a different direction. And now I'm working on I've only started 2 of them, but I'm working on 7 or 8 like rewriting
structures,
rewritings of stories like that, which are going to be massive, probably 3-hour long videos.
Right.
But I have the creative drive to do it because like I finish a thing every week. Yeah. And that feels good. And I'm not like tied down to this 3-hour video that's going to take
There's definitely a lot of dread from like artists when they feel like they can't produce something. Like it really starts to hang over people or whatnot. You know, going into this, me and like so many other people, when you see like these channels like, you know, PBG and the Completionists and stuff, and you see these like really well-crafted game reviews, you can't help but think like, oh, I want to do that too. I know how to do it. I'm going to do it. And when I first entered YouTube, I was kind of going in with trying to create things like that as well. And nothing against that kind of format. But what I realized at some point is just, I'm not able to produce those at a pace fast enough to where it's gratifying to me. I find this kind of more podcast format lets me kind of appreciate the moment and the dialogue more than being stuck with my own voice for so long inside of a weird cloud of project that I don't even know what the thing's going to look like.
And like with a lot of those guys, you also have to remember like Gerard and Austin and even to not a lesser extent, they still started at the same time, like John Tron and all the old school animators. They started YouTube at a time where you could take months on something and YouTube wouldn't punish you for it.
Yeah.
They got in a like the luck we were talking about. They got in at a lucky time where that format worked, and they were able to grow to a point where like none of those guys do that by themselves anymore.
Right.
They all have people helping write and shoot and edit.
Absolutely.
And as they should, because it's turned into like it's still a creative passion of theirs, but it's also their jobs, right?
Yeah, and the job requires them to do it quicker. You know, it's
exactly like YouTube requires like at a minimum like 2 uploads a month, which just would have been impossible for. I don't want to say definitively anybody, but would have been impossible for a lot of creatives 10 years ago.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that just goes back to what we were saying just about like letting your projects evolve. You know, if you see something like that and you think like, I want to do that, but those people have teams or whatnot. If you're watching things made by teams and you think I want to do that myself, it's okay to let your project change. You know, it's okay to like let your vision shift a little bit and make something that's more pertaining to what you're actually capable of and whatnot, because
there is no shame adapting a big idea into a small idea.
Absolutely.
Because if that small idea catches on, you can let it grow, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let it become this big, great thing. Yeah. Maybe you'll have your own team one day, right? Like, yeah.
I like the using the glass example, because it's like you can either picture like a really tall full glass of liquid or whatnot, But if you try to fill that cup, you're going to need a lot of water before that thing fills. But if you grab a cup small enough, if you start with a smaller foundation or whatnot, you could then pour the water in. And if it ever starts overflowing, just put it in the bigger cup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm really weird with
That's a great analogy.
But...
That's a great analogy. And
continue.
That smaller glass is just as useful as the bigger glass. And the bigger the glass gets, the heavier it gets, and the more it's going to take more people to lift it up, right?
Yeah, and the heavier it is, the harder it is to put on your head and weigh your mindset down. See, I'm great at it. Yeah.
But that's real, though. Like, it
is.
It gets heavy.
And speaking of mindsets, I'd kind of like to transition now because I would like to ask this question before we wrap up. Because I ask everybody who's watching knows this. But with everything going on in 2020 or whatnot, how would you say your creative mindset has been affected? Has it been like almost like you kind of have to work on things because of everything going on? If you felt it been a creative drought, what's the process for you?
Yeah. Like, this is a great question, by the way, and I'm interested to see what other people said. For me, like, honestly, I didn't really see a huge change in my life.
Sure.
Before this, I went to the gym 4 or 5 times a week, which is no longer a thing.
Yeah.
And
I just started my gym schedule. I was so frustrated.
Yeah. I've gained a lot of weight because of this quarantine. Anyway. And that was like pretty much the only time I ever went out. I also had like some personal life changes happen at the end of 2019. So like I was not in a super great place to begin with. Sure. And COVID kind of didn't really like change my personal, obviously it's affected, like it's horrible that so many people have been infected and had life-changing issues because of it, or have unfortunately passed away. That's awful. I've been very fortunate. My personal family has not been affected, thankfully.
Right. And it's looking like your work has not been affected a ton.
Yeah. Like to get back to what you were asking. Yeah. Like I honestly feel like it's been a creative boon. Because a lot of the feelings of frustration I've gotten out into like other creative work I'm doing, like writing and that sort of stuff. YouTube has kind of become a brick, a stone, a rock I can kind of latch onto in the turbulent time.
Of course.
So honestly, it's been a pretty good year for me. For
sure. Yeah. And, like, we're fortunate in that sense. Like, I guess creators or people who, work at home, the transition was definitely a little bit easier for them.
Mm-hmm.
But like you were mentioning, just the idea of what other people are going through definitely daunts on us also. Do you find that you've been going more into like escapism with regards to maybe watching more YouTube videos than usual or catching up on more shows? Like,
absolutely.
Have you been indulging in more? Okay.
100%. Absolutely. Not to bring politics into stuff, but
sure.
Early on, my candidate did not win a primary. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm checking out. And then unfortunately, events in the United States happened where it was no longer ignored. So I had to, it could no longer be ignored. So I had to be invested. And escapism became very important during that stressful time. And again, this is not to say like, I'm very lucky in my position to not have to deal with a lot of the problems a lot of less privileged people do.
It's absolutely okay to also just feel down about other events, things that don't pertain to you.
But yeah, that got way off topic. I'm sorry, but yeah, absolutely.
That's how the podcast goes. We start somewhere and we end somewhere else. It's totally fine. But have you found that do you think watching all this other like content being made and indulging on all this like art for lack of a better word, have you found that's been like what's inspiring you to create, or do you think it's purely out of just like what else am I supposed to do?
I think Yes. To answer your question, yes, it has really inspired me. But I think the quarantine really got me to watch a lot of content I normally wouldn't have. I've really gotten into
interesting
a lot of booktube, I think is what they call it. Also because I want to start writing fiction more.
Of course.
I've gotten into a lot of booktube. I've gotten into a lot of like VFX YouTubers, like the Corridor crew. They're amazing. Corridor Digital.
Interesting. Okay.
But that's how talking about Beeple earlier. That's how I found Beeple, was through their stuff. So it's kind of broadened my like consumption, creative horizons and consumption of media into stuff I normally wouldn't have ever watched. Like, and it's really helpful to see how different people work on the different levels of stuff. Like Corridor Digital puts way more work into their videos than like a booktuber I like. His name is Daniel Green. He does like 5 videos a week, and it's him in front of his camera talking about a book he read or reviewing that stuff or going over like he's a fantasy news aggregation. And both of those things are equally valid and
for sure
necessary. And it's great. It's been great to see that. And some people are better at different formats, right? Like, there's like free form discussion, and then there's also like writing things down and then voicing it and then editing and uploading or whatnot. What I've noticed after talking to a lot of different creators is that some people are just better at articulating themselves on pen and paper, while some people you just put a microphone in front of them and they feel like they can better get their thoughts out just in a one and done kind of situation. Do you find that you favor either one of those? Absolutely. And what you just described is 100% a real thing. I know people who, I don't want to name names again. I don't want to like call anybody out. I don't even think this would be a call out, but like
some people who are better in front of a microphone than they are typing.
Absolutely. I had a friend who tried so hard at the like YouTube gaming video production because he had so many amazing ideas and he's super articulate and ton of great ideas and very outspoken and thinks about like that stuff, and he just did not like the writing part of it. But if you just have him sit down and talk, he can talk about games and just spout incredibly like insightful thoughts and that sort of stuff. Where as someone like me, I feel like I'm stumbling over my words in this podcast, like going all over. I was talking about Bernie Sanders earlier. Like, what's going on? Like, what does that have to do with anything?
If you were to write a poem, it'd be perfectly articulate.
Yeah, because I spend so much time thinking about like, oh, I like this word choice better than that word choice. I like, is this something I really want to say, or would I say it a different way?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So has it always been that way, or do you think you've had to like, you kind of crafted that skill set just by necessity? Like, do you find at one point you might have been better just in front of a microphone as opposed to writing it down,
no, I think I've always been like that.
Pretty much always. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Because I had a bit of a flip. I started off much better on pen and paper or whatnot. I felt like I couldn't even hold up a conversation. Not even just about interesting topics, but like in socially, like I felt like I had a lot of trouble just holding up a conversation. And writing stuff is where I could really get my thoughts out there. Nowadays, it's kind of flipped. I do all these podcasts, and I find that just I can get my message through a lot easier and effectively through talking into a microphone in this style. While if I were to write things down, I'd get so lost in like no, it has to be put this way, like how's the formatting or whatnot. And that all just ends up distracting from my actual message. So I just kind of had that change at some point. And I think it's interesting that creators just all operate differently,
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And like, I also have a friend who's an expert painter or whatnot. He's such a good really good at painting basically. And ceramics also. And he built up, any time he's kind of in like a more microphone situation, he has a hard time articulating exactly what he's thinking. But then you just see one of his paintings and you're like, this is how he communicates. This is like, he's able to say so much more than I can with just a microphone by painting onto like a canvas or whatnot. And I just always find that interesting, just seeing different ways artists can, because that's what art is, right? It's communication. And it's just cool seeing people's different methods of doing so and their different skill sets.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like, some people have amazing messages they get through their film, and some people have amazing messages they get through public speaking. And yeah, I agree. It's fascinating.
And it's okay to embrace your strengths. You know, if you are having a hard time like writing out a script, but you think you can do better on a microphone, or if you're having a hard time on the microphone, you think you do better on a script, try switching it up. You know, like you were mentioning your friend earlier who wants to make the high quality things, but like is having trouble on scripting. You know, maybe it'd be beneficial if you started a podcast or something, just to, because even if you still work on that stuff in the back burner, it's important to have some method of getting your voice out there, right? Whatever you can effectively do that with.
Yeah, they like. That friend like ended up like not giving up, but like realizing that the YouTube video essay format was not his forte, and he did move on into other stuff and really found his voice and hit his stride with stuff like podcasts. So right.
But that said, it's always good to also experiment with the other side, you know. If you can get to a point where you're good at both, hey, more power to you, you know. And practice makes perfect.
If you have both skills, that's amazing. Like, embrace that for sure.
Definitely. Well, as sad as it is for me to say, we actually are going to have to start wrapping this up. Thank you so much for joining. If you would like, you can kind of explain where people can find you and find your work or whatnot. Keep in mind that the date at which this comes out is in a nebula, so maybe not too timely. But
I have a vague schedule of stuff coming out. I don't even really know though.
Gotcha.
My main project right now is youtube.com/fullmotionvideos. It's exactly how it sounds. That's a channel all about lore and storytelling and secrets and Easter eggs in games and movies and all sorts of stuff. I'm still kind of finding what exactly I want that channel to be, but I have a lot of hopes for it. That's the main place you'll find me online. You can follow me on Twitter at Furst, Furst, FORREST. I'm barely ever on there anymore.
If you guys want to see a healthy amount of tweets being sent.
like 2 a month. Something like that.
Honestly, any more and you're going crazy. It's bad.
Yeah,
it's bad.
You can follow me there if you want. I have the same Instagram URL, also very sparingly used, but
as you all should. Okay.
I had the social media addiction for the longest time. It's much better without it. So
I still have it, but at least I can acknowledge that I have it, and I'm trying. I'm working. I limited myself no more than one tweet a day. You know,
there you go.
Whatever I'm saying doesn't need to be said like twice in one day. So, but anyway, that could honestly warrant its own podcast. It's just talking about how social network has affected people creatively. Yeah. But in fact, maybe I'll make that a topic. Thank you for having me on.
By the way, I really appreciate that. This has been great. You were right. We totally ran through this hour without.
I know. I knew it was going to happen too, because I honestly always give people the choice of the 30-minute in the invite or whatnot, and it's no one ever accepts it. I'm like, okay, good, because that'd be hard to condense or whatnot. But also, as I mentioned earlier, like you were one of two people that I thought would make like the best guests for this podcast. So I'm very thankful for you joining. Also, the other person, spoiler to those who made it to the end of the episode, but. The other person is Luke Sizemore, who has just graciously agreed to join. So,
dude, heck yeah.
Be excited for that.
Luke's great.
So now I could just stop the podcast. I got the two people I wanted most, you know?
Luke's great. He'll have a ton of insightful,
I look forward to it.
Yeah,
for sure. But of course, you've been great as well. I very much appreciate having you on. And I appreciate all you guys for watching and supporting me here on Patreon. If you want to catch any of these topics in a more condensed form, they of course will be uploading clips over on my YouTube channel, and you can always find them there if you wish. And of course, there'll be another podcast coming soon, so stay tuned for that. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Goodbye.
So long.